Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. Today's guest is Sophie Grace Holmes. She is a fitness coach and endurance athlete living with cystic fibrosis, a life-threatening condition affecting the lungs and other organs in the body, which makes an already tough life that extra bit harder. In this episode, we discuss what it is like living with CF, the various challenges Sophie has overcome, surmounting many physical feats very few are capable of, including becoming the second woman ever to climb Mount Kilimanjaro with CF, how she paddleboarded 80 miles from the Bahamas to Florida without being eaten by a shark, how she handled being told she would not likely live past her teen years, her approach to life's obstacles, and her next big challenge, which sees her tackling 36 marathons in 36 days. It's a very, very cool episode. I really find Sophie's approach to life rather inspiring. She is one of these rare types of people who refuses to accept the narrative that has been painted for her, and for not only to her ability to adapt to the challenges CF presents, but also to thrive with it. I think we can really take a leaf out of her book and take a few lessons away from this one. So without further ado, Sophie Grace Holmes. So, Sophie Grace Holmes, I'm very excited to have you on here. Followed your account for a while now, and I think you're a bit of a superhuman. So, welcome.
Thank you so much. You are too kind, as we've just discussed. I don't bounce on the slopes.
No, as the cast would suggest. So, I've struggled a little bit to know what to talk about with you because you've done so much. Just very cool stuff, really. You've got a bit of a track record for things that people only do once in a lifetime, but you seem to do something like that in each given month. So yeah, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, I like to start with a bit of an introduction about my guests, and I like to hand it over to them so they can sort of best describe who they are and what they do. So yeah, can you just give us a bit of a background to Sophie Grace Holmes?
Absolutely. I think the best place probably to start is at the beginning. So I was born with a life-threatening lung disease called cystic fibrosis. And if you don't know what CF is, it, as I've said, affects your lungs, but also affects other organs in your body, which I think sometimes people don't see. And it is an invisible illness. So, for so many years, I look well, but I wasn't well on the inside. I was diagnosed at 4 months old, and my mum and dad only describe it like bringing up a baby to die, because they were told I wouldn't make 16 years old and I certainly wouldn't achieve anything in life, and I would spend most of my life in the hospital, maybe on oxygen, but don't hope for anything more than that. But obviously left they know that I was much more determined and driven than that, and I have had many setbacks, which I'm sure we'll get into, but being honest, I wouldn't change the life I've been given. It has given me a lot of life in the years I have had, and also I think kind of fast-tracked me into living and doing things, as you've said, that many people wouldn't be brave enough to do. And so I'm grateful for that. And actually, without the hardships and the things that have happened to me, I certainly wouldn't be chasing the things that I am currently chasing. So although cystic fibrosis is not comparable between people, for me, it has given me a lot of life. And a lot of lessons, but CS is hopefully in the long run going to be something that people can live limitlessly with. But for me, before my most recent years wasn't the case, and I've had to fight a lot just to be alive, let alone kind of do the things I've done.
And I think take a lot for granted, really, as someone who doesn't have anything like a life-threatening condition. You see these people on Instagram and social media, things like that, and you think, oh yeah, cool, but it's so hard to comprehend that, living like that day to day and just not knowing what's around the corner. And I always think it's really incredible to see your kind of outlook and the fact that you are just like, nah, I just refuse to accept the narrative that's given to you. And I think for the for the vast majority of people, that would have been just like game over straight away. What's the point of doing anything now, because I've been given this kind of, and it's by a medical professional. So these are by people who ought to know, and these are people you trust, and you take what they say as, as gospel. It's like, okay, if a doctor said it and multiple doctors have said it, then it must be true. So to be able to kind of challenge that narrative and push through, I think is really quite something special. Is there anything you found that you've drawn upon to help you get through that? Is there any sort of standout moments to you that you think actually it was maybe a quote? I've heard you refer to a couple of quotes in the past, or I've got one later on that I want to show you as well. But yeah, is there anything along those lines that you think have sort of been like a switching point moment for you?
Oh, definitely. I've had plenty, and I think there's a few, especially when I was younger, that I will explore. So the first one, obviously, when I was in school growing up, and I honestly, although I had my setbacks and I was on over 80 tablets a day, I honestly didn't believe that I had the condition that they were telling me, because here I was, 15 years old, 16 years old, running for county on track, doing all these sports. And my measure at school was like, who can I beat PE? And if I was at the top of PE, obviously I'm fine. And I was, unwell but well. And I was like, they must have got it wrong. Like, I don't understand what's going on. And I think when I did reach 16, the doctors, I think many people who have come across doctors would understand this. They have a way with words sometimes. And they went, so you've done well to reach 16, but you're probably halfway through your life. So how does that make you feel? Because by then the age expectancy for people with CF had gone to 30. And I was a bit like, whoa, like, hang on a minute, like, how can you suddenly throw these words around? Unfortunately, when I reached 19, I did become really unwell. And they, tried everything to get me better and things like that. And I remember sitting in my hospital room and the doctor sitting on the end of my bed going, well, nothing's working. And if you carried on this rate, you probably got 2 years. And I remember thinking like, wow, like they were never words so I kind of anticipated hearing, but thank God I did, because for me, that moment in time was at the moment where I turned around and said, I actually don't want to underdose. And I want to be able to fill my years doing the things that I love to do and experiencing all life has to offer. And so I sat there, drew up a long bucket list. Despite obviously how unwell I was, and, getting out of bed was hard work, and was like, that's it. If I want to improve my health, like, I need to learn how to do that. And I need to work with people that are going to help me. I need to change my career path. I need to do absolutely everything in my power to be able to breathe and be able to live my life. And so that's exactly what I did. And with a 50% lung function, a year later, I went and summited Mount Kilimanjaro, being the second female in the world to do that with CF. And I remember sitting at the top of Kilimanjaro being like, well, they didn't believe I could do it. So what else could I do? And how else could I improve my health? And I kind of, since then, things have spiraled and I've done all kinds of things. And so it's that pivotal moment that many people would have seen or maybe given into or seen as a failure, or like, the unable to kind of move through that. The life that I've experienced since then would never have happened. And I think this is why perception of situations and how you react to things is so important. And thankfully, my younger me was able to see through that.
Yeah, it's always really interesting to see how much you can push the human body as well. There's some amazing people that have done some, quite frankly, absurd feats in their life. So you got, Ross Edgley, who's swum around the UK.
Yeah.
It was over 100 days. He didn't set foot on land, 6 hours on, 6 hours off swimming. And that just boggles my mind. You've got Jay Alderton he box jumped the height of Everest. You've got another guy, Tom Kemp, I think did it. And I think Ross Edgley did it as well, about rope climbing the height of Everest. And it's just, I think, the current guy as well, I can't remember what his name is, but he's known as the hardest geezer. He's running across Africa.
Amazing.
And it's just insane what you can do. And I think that, I don't know if it's because social media didn't give you the exposure to those types of people before, but now it just seems like there's so many people doing things that I would never have believed to be, or even crossed my mind as to being possible in your lifetime. Yet there's people doing it out here, doing it every day. There's, you're, a unique individual in that you've got this condition and you're pushing on and doing all these challenges. And there's so many other people that are doing these challenges as well, but they don't have that condition. And there's also people that would never even dream of being able to run a marathon, let alone we'll get onto your latest challenge a bit later on, but yeah, so it's quite incredible. And I think I've heard people describe illnesses and events like this as, some people describe them as their superpower. And from what you've said before, you said it, you wouldn't have thought that you would be able to do the things you've done without that diagnosis. So does that would you describe it as a superpower, or is that a bit too nice to call it a superpower?
I think you can do it. And I think, again, it comes down to perception. And because I think many people would be like, hang on a minute, you were born with a life-threatening lung disease that is not curable, and yet you're grateful for it. And I think for me, especially with the challenges I have done, I always look back and think the younger me would be so proud that I'm not giving up, despite nobody believing that I would ever be able to do anything with my life. And I think as well, you have to use the situations you're in to your advantage and find a way through them, because otherwise we'd never do anything in life. And granted, many people are like, oh God, here she goes again, what are you going to do this time? But for me, I've got a few fears in life, and one of them is regret. And for me, there's a phrase, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said it, and they said, it's the excuses you make today that will be the regrets you have at the end of your life. And for me, I love being able to push myself and see what I can achieve mentally and physically. And I know that I would regret not leaning into that discomfort because of what you can get from that if I didn't just try and do these things that are deemed impossible. Because what's the point in life unless you're going to do something with it, or you're going to do what you want to do with it, more importantly. And for me, I know that if I didn't do these things, it would be a massive regret for me. And I'd get to my deathbed and be like, the life I could have had versus the life that I had. And I think when I embark on deciding to do things, I'm like, would I regret not trying, or would I regret not giving it my all? Because I think it's so easy to kind of stay in comfort, whereas if you go into discomfort, you really find out what you're made of, who you are, your capabilities. And I think I also understand not many people, or people don't want to do that, but you miss out because of what you can then develop within your life and the experiences and the people you meet. And my most favourite moments are by far my most uncomfortable, such as climbing Kilimanjaro or doing the other things I've done. I did a paddleboard race a couple of years ago, which was definitely by far the hardest thing I've ever done, partly because I'd never paddled in the ocean before, and it was 80 miles across the Gulf Stream. But that day will never leave me. It was phenomenal on so many different levels. And I think it's what you make out of the situation that you're in, because of course I could have sat there and been like, well, I've got CF, what's the point? But then time goes by anyway, right? And so you either decide to make the most of the time you've got and embrace it and enjoy it, or you sit back and look back and be like, well, I kind of haven't done anything, or I haven't done anything I wanted to do because I was scared or whatever. So for me, if I'm fearful of something, it's also a sign that I should do it.
Yeah. There's a quote, I think, to do with the pain of regret is often greater than the pain of actually doing the thing you didn't want to do in the first place. I can't remember, I've just paraphrased that
precisely
completely, but the Stoics have got an idea of memento mori, and I think you can get these calendars which have basically got your life mapped out in weeks. So each week you can go and you can tick it off, and it's horrendous to look at, because you realise the brevity of life when you have it displayed in front of you in a matter of weeks, and you're filling in these boxes of the weeks of your life, and you realise holy shit, I've done about 25% of my life already. And there's not actually, when I end up going into a bit of a rabbit hole when I look at that sort of thing and realise I'm I haven't achieved anything I wanted to do, and things like that as well, and I end up in a bit of a flat. But it's those, time is very, very short, and we always get to the end of the year and we go, oh, I don't know where the year's gone, and it's just a default thing as humans, especially as Brits, where we're just oh God, it's sort of same old, I don't know where the year's gone again. But from that moment, I've been trying to focus on actually on a month by month basis. I try not to put stuff off too long. So actually, I was looking at your account, that's inspired me to do my first half marathon. So I've signed up.
No way.
Signed up for
I love that.
For the Bath half, And it was very much, I saw it pop up on my Instagram and I was like, yeah, go on then, I'll do it. Because I always say to myself each year, I'll do an event or I'll do a sporting event. Maybe I'll try for a marathon or something like that. And it gets you get to the middle of the year and you realize all of the events are pretty much passed anyway by that point. So you got to wait until the next year, and then the next year rolls around. You're like, I was going to sign up for that, and you never do. And before you know it, you've been promising yourself you're going to do an event for 3-4 years, and you never do it. And you're like, well, where's the time gone? So I'm trying to just say yes to more things like that and just try it. I'm a firm believer in just trying things first. At least once. You can, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, especially for me, something I've got very good at socially in approaching people. Whereas before it would be a case of I don't know what they might think of me. I don't want to sort of bother that person. But now I go up and I have that conversation because you never know where it's going to lead.
Exactly.
It's something I'm trying to do a bit more of in like a sporting sense and physical sense with things like challenges like that. But I think so many people, it goes back to that really corny saying of missing 100% of the shots you never take, right? But if you don't approach people and you don't ask the question, you're never going to know what's happened. And that could be a question that changes your life or will come back to you at some point in your life and rear its head again. And you realise if you hadn't had that, you may not get these opportunities.
Oh, definitely. I agree with that so much. And I do believe in sliding doors and making your own luck. And I do believe things that are meant won't pass you by, but you also have to be open to opportunity and open those doors yourself.
Definitely.
And pushing yourself out there to, as you've said, meet people or do different challenges or have that conversation. Because I think, a lot of the time we can spend so much of our time being like, oh, what if? Or, oh, I don't want to do that because it's uncomfortable. Or, as you've said, I don't want to bother that person. But by having that conversation, what are you going to miss out on? You're going to miss out more by not trying and not doing these things, because you never know. You might find you do that half marathon, you're like, oh, okay, maybe the half's not for me, but I'd love to go and race a 10K, or I'd love to go and try high rocks, or I'd love to go and do these things. It might open that door of putting yourself in a community. There's loads of run clubs around and stuff that I see. And this is why, I'm a firm believer of also try something once.
Yeah.
Or, because you never know, you might find something that you actually really like to do. And until you try, how are you supposed to know? And it's, I think, human nature to get stuck in the same routine year after year, week by week. And I think it is a really nice idea to sit down at the beginning of each month and be like, okay, well, aside from the things that I have to do, what do I want to also do this month?
Yeah.
It could be I want to record a couple of more podcasts this month, or I want to book a race, or I want to, do that cooking lesson I wanted to do. And I think making sure that you're doing that consciously is a really important thing. Because I've been so guilty of it in the past, where life goes by and you're like, oh my goodness, what have I done? Nothing. Which you have done something. But I think as humans, we like to kind of earmark the big things in life as the main event, when actually some of the small things are also the main event, because they're the things that bring you peace.
Yeah.
With the excitement and all of that. And I think I've been massively guilty in the past, where I've only really recognised the big achievements, because for me, growing up, I got told I'd never achieve anything in life, in which case the only things that matters were the things that people believed I'd never do. Yeah.
It's the small wins that add up as well. I was speaking to another guest about this as well, and about, being present, and in Andrew Dace, who I had on, said about enjoying the reward. So it's not just about actually doing the thing, but it's about taking the time to acknowledge your efforts and the work that's gone into it. So all of the work that's led you to where you are now, all of the training, all the nights where you didn't want to get out of bed and you got out of bed, all the nights where you just wanted to sort of sit on the sofa for the whole weekend instead of going for your run. It's those small wins really do add up, and I think it's a war of attrition at the end of the day. It's not, if you just focus on the big ones, then you're only gonna find maybe 4 or 5 things that you've done that's gonna be really big. Whereas if you look at a more granular level, you can find 4 or 5 things every day that you think you've done really well, and the power of sort of compounding those into something big can really just help with your motivation, I think.
Oh, definitely. And I think one of the biggest things to also look at is the main or the most important part of achieving a goal isn't actually the goal itself. It's the things you achieve before that. So it's the person that you've become, the discipline, as you've said, and all the things in between where you've had to put things in place to ensure that you become the person that is able to achieve that goal. Because I think we put so much emphasis on, I want to go and run that marathon. You forget, you need to work backwards, and actually for you to do that, you have to execute the plan, you have to do the nutrition, you have to get the recovery in and all these things. And to be that person, you actually have to go and change as a person, which is the most amazing part.
I think it's fear of the unknown as well as what puts a lot of people off. And if you're trying something new for the first time, if you're trying a challenge that not many people have tried before, you said, for example, your Kilimanjaro escapade where you were the second one with cystic fibrosis to ever do that. Did you feel like that was the scale of the achievement? Did you feel like, actually, I've done something that few people have ever done before? Or to you were just like, yeah, it was a hard challenge, but, it's nothing insurmountable?
I think it's interesting because I was thinking about this recently, my mindset over the years, because I think there's so much power in naivety as well. Because back then I was like, well, I've got to go and do this challenge, otherwise I'm going to die, which is not realistic or real. But it's what saved me, right? So I was like, right, I'm going to go and do this challenge because I could be the second person in the world with CS to achieve it. And instead of recognizing the challenge, I got to the top and went, okay, cool, what's it? And I was guilty of that for quite a long time, doing numerous different challenges, whether it was running mountains, whatever it could be. And it was only until more recently where I sat back and I was like, a lot of people don't even do any of this stuff once. And I think especially because most of the stuff I've done was pre-social media, right? So it wasn't even out there. And I think now I would look back, like I did an ultra Ironman, self-supported 18 months ago. And I do look back and think, oh, that was a long day. That was a hard day, but I didn't give up. And especially because it was more planned on my half, and the 5K swim was done in the dark on my own with no lake support because it was a poor planning part. But I wasn't going to be put off by the fish that were following me, because I actually couldn't bear the thought of getting out of the lake and being like, oh, well, I didn't make it because the fish, and it was dark and I couldn't see a thing.
Was that all Italy, was it?
Yeah. And it was phenomenal. And I think this is why I love to try and encourage people just to do something. It doesn't have to be to the scale that I do. I just thrive off of doing these things that are ridiculous in a way. But it could just be like, I want to go and start a run, go and run a kilometre down the road. That's amazing. And I think this is also the problem with social media where, recognising that you don't have to do the big things. You could do the big things that are big for you, and that's still amazing. It doesn't have to be comparable to anyone else's, because also you're not starting on the same days. Like for me, doing the challenge that I've got, this is, 12 years deep into doing this kind of stuff. This isn't gone off one day and been like, you know what, I started running 3 weeks ago and I want to go do this thing. And I think that's a really important thing to remind yourself of. And I think this challenge that I am training for is going to be by far the biggest thing I've ever attempted in my entire life, aside from obviously not dying, which is also quite a big achievement in itself.
Yeah, props for that one.
Yeah. Well done, me. But I think it's really important to emphasize that, because I think it's great talking about these amazing big things, but what is also amazing is people just trying stuff, no matter what it is, stuff that's not in their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because I think, especially people with CF, there are still people out there, and there's many people out there that aren't well, and even just getting up out of bed is hard work. And I think it's so easy to kind of get stuck in the, well, that person's doing it and I'm not doing that, or I can't do that, or I couldn't imagine doing that. But I think it's about taking inspiration on your own need and own level to apply it to your own life, to be like, well, what person do I want to become by doing these things?
There's a difference between, so for example, people looking to you could be very inspired. Take the example of I signed up for the half marathon because I saw your challenge attempt, and I was like, okay, well, if you can do that with CF, no matter how deep you are into it with all the training you've done in the past, then I can at least give this a try. But once that once that initial kind of buzz and that motivation wears off, a lot of people, I think it's the Marines, I don't know, I think I'm quoting sort of Churchillian drift now. It's a principle where everything, no matter what it is, gets attributed to Churchill or someone incorrectly. But I think it was the Marines who basically said, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. And so when that initial motivation wears off, which I think a lot of people rely on, they say, I don't have the motivation to do it. You go onto YouTube, you can type in these motivational speakers and these videos which will pump you up, and you're good for maybe a month, and then it start or maybe less, and then that starts to fizzle out a little bit, and you look into things as to well, how do I keep going for this? And I was discussing this with another guest of mine who does Ironman, and she said goal setting is probably the most important thing, at least for her, because when you're going through your training, and then when you get to the race and it's the hard stuff's happening, you can look back and go, actually, I set out to achieve this, and also my training has led me to the point where I know what's going to happen. I know that this cramping is natural to happen at this point in the race because I've trained for it. Do you rely on discipline, or do you use motivation? Obviously, you've got quite a big motivator in that you don't want to die, but that aside, is there anything else beyond that you rely on quite frequently, you think?
I think the motivation discipline scenario is a really interesting one, because I think, as you've said, motivation is something you can't rely on, because after the initial buzz has gone, what it comes down to is you actually executing the plan to be able to achieve these things. But discipline breeds motivation. So if you become disciplined and stick to the sessions you've got to do, you're more likely to be motivated. And the more disciplined that you can push yourself to be, then you're going to do what needs to be done, because you understand that you're never going to achieve it otherwise, or you might, but it will hurt a lot more. And I think the guest that you've just spoken to probably mentioned that the training is the hard part. Obviously, this might not apply to me and my challenge, because that's also going to be incredibly hard. But most of the time, if you can execute the training and you've got a good coach, the training plan will exceed what you need to achieve that goal. And it all comes down to your mindset and how much you want to achieve it, and understanding that you're not always going to love it. You're not always going to enjoy the training. But what you are going to get from it is the ability to know that you can do hard things. And I believe that if you do hard things consistently enough, life becomes easier. Whereas if you do easy things, life will always just be hard, because you don't know how to handle situations. And I think this is the power of being able to do training and move, is it actually helps you understand how to tackle what life throws at you, because life is a roller coaster. Like, there's no one that I have met that has ever had a really easy life. And I think people that I have also spoken to in the past have also said, if the hard stuff didn't happen, or the failures, which I don't really believe in failure either, don't happen, life doesn't change. And if nothing changes, then where are you going to end up? And I think life will also keep repeating the lessons until you decide to change something. And so it's just this vicious circle. So when it comes down to discipline and motivation, of course, it takes time to build up discipline, but the quickest way to become confident in what you're doing is to do the things that you set out to do, i.e. follow the training plan, or wherever it could be, surrounding whatever goal, whether it's personal, fitness, work related, like you can apply it to everything. And I think, we're all guilty of missing things, or not doing it, or not getting out to that brand. But this is why I love setting goals that are so big that they scare the hell out of me, because it will scare me into doing this training. Like, for example, obviously I've got an amazing coach for this marathon challenge that I'm doing. Obviously, I broke my wrist 2 weeks ago. And he was like, so long as you can run, you'll be fine. But from this day on, you cannot miss 1 kilometre of that training plan, because that's just, otherwise it will be too hard, and that is that. And whether he's done it to scare me, but I also believe that he's right. Being a coach myself, you have to put your body through what it needs to go through to be able to achieve the things. And I think more so mentally, because the mental side of achieving challenges is one of the hardest things. And so if you can't push yourself to become disciplined mentally, then you are going to suffer a lot more.
Yeah, Ross Edgley talks quite a lot about it, about getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. And I think discomfort is a scary place. No one likes to be uncomfortable. Humans are designed to be safe and warm, and the Maslow's hierarchy of needs make sure everything's met and we're all safe and all good. But it does take a great deal of courage, I think, to put yourself in a position where you know it's going to suck and you anticipate it's going to suck, but you do it anyways. And there is a principle I learned from Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist at Stanford University, and he described an area of the brain called the ACC. I think it's called the anterior cingulate cortex. Sounds very fancy, but it's that part of the brain is associated with like cognitive functions and things like it's associated with things like willpower. And they found that when you do something that you actively do something that you don't want to do, you can actually train that like a muscle. You can train your willpower essentially. So the more times that you put yourself in situations where you don't want to do it, you have high anxiety levels leading up to it. Let's take the really popular one at the moment of like ice baths or a cold shower, where you hate it, doesn't get any better each time, but you do it anyways. You can actually train that. That's consciously training your kind of willpower and self-discipline to be able to do that. So it's interesting that you can actually train this sort of stuff. It's not something that's just, for some people it may be that it may come a bit more naturally to some other people depending on what your motivations are, but you can actively go out of your way to be able to do that. And by doing that, you're strengthening that willpower and making you eventually do bigger and bigger things that you don't want to do, such as paddleboarding 80 miles across. You're quite literally throwing yourself in at the deep end with that one, weren't you?
Yeah, it's been a running theme really for the last 10 years where I'll get offered a challenge quite last minute and I've gone, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? I remember flying in to Florida and then obviously getting a boat over to the Bahamas, being like, I am so jet lagged, and tomorrow night I need to go and paddleboard 80 miles back to Florida. And I think normally in this challenge, the wind's behind you, the weather's not that bad. Like when we went over, it was like glass water. It was absolutely beautiful. The night of the challenge, of course, thunder and lightning came in. And I remember leaving the shore being like, cool. How hard could it be? And there's a couple of really vivid memories with that, where obviously with it, you have a captain in a boat to follow with the GPS and safety reasons, because there's about 200 paddlers. There's a few boats out there. And I remember getting to, I think it must have been about an hour in, the captain being like, you're doing so well, keep going, you've done 3 miles. I was like, that has just destroyed my entire soul. That, because I am so tired, and it was obviously so warm and the waves were so big, and somebody had already been bitten by a shark, and I was like, this is going to be by far the most mental night of my entire life. And it was. And the other thing that really kind of plays on my mind is that when you do these kind of challenges and these experiences, you also have the opportunity to experience things that most people won't. So for example, obviously that in itself is a very niche thing, but within the whole experience, by the time the sun had come up, the storm had gone away, the waters were flat, and there was no land to be seen. So like we were in the middle of the ocean on a paddleboard surrounded by the sunrise. And I don't know many other circumstances where people would have been in that position, other than obviously if you're on a boat. But I remember just being like, although this is really hard and it's emotional and it's challenging every single part of my sanity, how phenomenal is it that by the time I get to the other end, which I will get to, I have these memories and these experiences, and knowing that I can tackle things that are weird and wonderful and bizarre and amazing. And I think when you do these things, it only spurs you on to then want to do more.
Yeah, sort of getting that appetite for the more exciting. It sounds, I don't know, some people that might sound absolutely terrifying, being in the middle of the ocean, like not having anything around you. But it also sounds like it came with a level of serenity almost, where it's kind of just you and, aside from the 200 other people, most of which probably didn't make it by that point. But yeah, that sort of being out there and taking that all in. And I think it's a good point actually, because there's a lot of times we just kind of head down and get through stuff without actually taking, and it's this idea of being present, right? Taking in the sights around us, even in the cold I went for a run the other day and it was peeing it down with rain. And actually, it was probably the most fun I've ever had running recently as well, because I walked in absolutely drenched. And if I'd have looked at that and it would have been peeing it down with rain beforehand, I would have been like, do I really want to go and do that? But actually, going out there, it was a nice temperature, it was cool. Like, don't often run in the rain, and it's quite fun, to be honest, and just sort of taking in everything around me. It was, I really enjoyed the experience. And I think a lot of the time people just kind of head down, bulldoze their way through, especially when it gets like harder challenges, but don't take the time to sort of appreciate what's going on around them, and actually that they are capable of doing that sort of thing.
I think so. And I think it's something that I am trying to be more conscious about, is being present within the emotion that you're in. Not so that it takes over, but I think we're human and we experience all these different kinds of emotions for all kinds of different reasons. And I think it's about getting to know yourself as well, and knowing that you might be out in that rain doing that run and it's windy and it's maybe a bit cold, but you found fun in it, right? So it's about actually realizing that the things that we perceive potentially to be not fun, you actually might enjoy. And I think we're so quick to put an emotional state onto something before we do it or experience it. Because I think some of the best, as I've said, times and the most happiest times and the most memorable times have also been some of the strangest and hardest scenarios that I've placed myself in. And I think it's a huge reminder. And I think even like this past weekend where I had 2 very long runs, the first on the Saturday, I found myself in some strange mental state for some unknown reason. But obviously I was like, well, I've got to do these kilometres. And then the next day it was absolutely never rain. I still got up there and did it, left at 6 a.m. And afterwards I sat there and I was like, do you know what? It just shows that us as people can do these things. And I think it's really important to consistently put yourself into these uncomfortable positions. They don't have to be extreme. It could just be going for a run in the rain, because it makes you realise actually what we are able to do and actually find joy in as well.
Yeah, definitely. Do you ever get bored on these long runs?
Yeah, but I think that's part of it, isn't it? We're not meant to always love them and find them fun. And to be honest, the one that I did do on Saturday that ended up in a bit of a strange mindset, I promised myself at the bakery at the end. I actually ran probably 3 kilometres further away to run the 3K back that I need to do to commit to the miles, just so that I can go to the bakery, because the bakery was still a kilometre from my house. So then obviously I walked back. I think it's about finding the fun in it and actually understanding that being bored is okay. Because I think with social media and scrolling and all these kinds of things, we try and entertain our brains all the time, and actually being bored is okay, even though it doesn't seem so fun. But not every part of life is fun. So for me, like, learning to be bored, especially with the challenge I've got coming up, I need to be really okay with that. So it'll probably do me some good.
It's like delayed gratification almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just getting that short-term stuff, which, as you say, it's kind of being programmed into us now with these short hits of dopamine. And you see it even in things like films now as well. The duration of cutscenes and sort of action scenes, they tend to be so fast-moving, and that's sort of parallelized with the whole TikTok scrolling, because most of the time you're only looking for a few seconds, and so you actually see how much of a transition effect it's having on things like that entertain us on the wider scale. So actually being able to, not have that, and it's a good point really about this sort of blind positivity that people think you must have with everything must be amazing. Even in all these challenges, you must enjoy every second of it. It's not, but it's kind of, I think my friend calls it type 2 fun, where it's not fun at the time and it's horrible, but after the fact you feel so much better. It's like doing a really hard workout at the gym, or one where you're absolutely blown out your ass by the end of it, but an hour later you're like, actually I'm really proud of myself for getting through that.
Yeah, exactly. You literally get an hour on the head, and I couldn't have said it better myself, to be honest. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It is so important to keep doing that. Type 2 fun is actually the best kind of fun, in a way.
You heard it here first.
Noted.
So I said to you earlier, I had a quote for you, and I think it's kind of, I love a good quote on this podcast. I don't know about you, but sometimes you just need a good quote to get through the day. But it was Confucius who said, every man has two lives, and the second starts when they realise they only have one. So
that's a very good quote.
That for me is kind of, when we go back to this idea of memento mori and the brevity of life and things like that, that's when I go into panic mode and go, actually, shit, there's not a lot of time actually left. And yeah, it kind of inspires you to kind of get on and look at doing things with a sense of urgency rather than sort of delaying it for a later date. So I'm trying to sort of work on getting better at that, really.
Yeah, and I think why not? Because I think this is where CF has given me the step up. It has made me do it early, and by far earlier than maybe other people, right? Because I got told from a very young age, no, you're not going to do anything in life, and that made me go, all right, watch me. But I think, no one knows how long you're going to be here for, right? And I think it is so easy to get so busy in the, oh yeah, but I need to earn this amount of money, I need to have this amount of savings, I need to achieve all these different things. But it's like, well, that's perfectly fine and valid. But what else do you want to do that potentially you couldn't do when you're 60? Like, some of the challenges that I have done, of course, there'll be plenty of 6-year-olds that will be able to do it. But I might not be able to. So how about doing the things that I want to do now, if I can? Create the opportunity, find a way. Because I do believe we will have the opportunity to achieve the things we want to achieve. And some people will take longer, some people will take, less time. Some people will have things that land at the right time. But I think we only have one shot. And I can't remember who said it, but it's similar to what you've just said. Is basically, we live like we're never going to die. So, you do all the things you want to do, but actually we only live once. And so we could die anytime. And it goes back to the fear of not putting yourself out there because you don't want to look silly or you don't want to be different to everybody else. But actually, I'm very well now, for example, but in 5 years' time, I might not be. And would I regret not doing the things I want to do now? I just was too scared to do them. Absolutely. And so, this is why, every single year, I try and do a big challenge or try and do something or learn something new, because why not? I would love to learn a language at some point. Maybe that'll be my 2025 goal.
Yeah.
And I would love to, be able to inspire someone else to simply try and do something that potentially they've never done, or achieve something that no one else would have thought they would have achieved. And I think it's about believing in yourself so highly and so much that other people have no choice but to believe in you too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always that, as you said before, about being naive enough to think you can do the impossible and just kind of giving it a shot anyways. And there's one about sort of shooting for the moon, and if you miss anyways, you kind of you hit somewhere nearby. Like, if you set the bar so unbelievably high, it doesn't matter if you actually get there, but the chances are you'll probably end up getting further ahead than you ever thought you would, was possible for you, and probably for a lot of people around you as well. I think people rely, as a society, I think if we do everything that everyone else wants us to do, if you actually look at the average person I think the average person in America is like divorced, overweight, and less than 1K in the bank. So actually, if you look at what people want you to do as a society, it's probably not the best trajectory for your life anyways. Like, people want to fit in and sort of, align into this mold because they don't want to stand out. But actually, everyone is so different anyways. Like, the fundamental nature of human beings is that they are so different from each other. Like, no two people are the same. Apart from identical twins, but even in identical twins,
then though, you don't know, do you? Like, the mindsets could be so different, and the wants and things like that. And I think you're right. Like, the power lies in you being an individual and actually leaning into that and being like, whatever happens, no one else can predict my next move. Only I can. And actually, no one knows when they're going to be suddenly skyrocketed into achieving something or success. So that's why you have to put those building blocks down and just be like, if I keep going, it will be on the road to success, however long that takes. I think there's a quote that says you could be working for 10 years and the last year is the year that you make it. But I think people are too afraid after failure to not try again. But failure is just feedback, and it's learning and understanding what does work, what doesn't work, and knowing that, understanding that people's opinions of you actually does not matter. And I think a lot of the internet like to judge people, like to troll people, but actually that is a pure perception of them as an individual person. And it's usually a reflection of them because they're not willing to put themselves out there to be vulnerable. Because I think there's a lot of power in being vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think it's the default mechanism for most people now, especially when they're giving you crap on social media, is it's like it's easy for you to say that's kind of, oh, it's all right for you because you're in this position, or it's all right for you because you have this upbringing. But it's just, I think when you get people like that, it's more a reflection, as you say, a reflection of their own insecurities, and they're trying to project their insecurities onto you. And to be able to say, it's actually almost pity those people, because it's just something that you've done has obviously generated something in them that's made them either regret not doing something, or it's kind of shone the light on their own circumstance to go, actually, well, you've had every opportunity to do something and do the things you wanted to do, but you haven't done it. And I think it kind of guilt trips people almost. They kind of take it as they're ashamed of themselves, so then they have to lash out at other people and try and bring them down to their level, which I think it's a defense mechanism a lot of the time when people do things like that.
Yeah, I think so. But I think for me, like, if I ever feel remotely triggered by anything, it's for me to look into that as to why. Like, what has caused that? It could be nothing to do with that, whatever that person's done or said. But it's something that I need to work through so that doesn't happen. Because I think, we all growing up have had things that have occurred to us in different forms. And a lot of the time, and I know I've been guilty of it in the past, just burying your head and being just like, right, we've got to get on with it. And I know that there's many things that I did because I thought it was the only way to survive. And especially when it came down to emotional state, because for me, the pattern was I got too stressed, got emotional, or got hurt by someone, and I ended up in hospital. And it was the pattern, right? So then I switched off all the things that made that happen. But then by doing that, you then miss out on so many other things. So therefore, once I'd realised this pattern, I was like, actually, it's really important to feel things as a human being and recognise emotion. And you're okay to be sitting in that emotion. But it's also happened for a reason, because of things that have happened to you. Because no one has gone through life without something going wrong or something being hard. And I think it's a really positive thing that people do now talk about this a bit more online. And, for me, for example, the reason I got into all these endurance-based sports is because I thought, because I was no better educated, but thank God in a way, it was the only way to save my own life. I wouldn't change that because I've experienced some phenomenal things, met some incredible people, and had conversations and opportunities that never would have happened if I hadn't naively chased that. But I think the more mature me goes, yeah, I kind of sometimes miss that attitude a little bit, because it's led to me to some amazing places, and I'm sure it still will. But it's also being of the understanding that you don't have to bury yourself in to miss out on other parts of life to achieve these things.
Yeah, 100%. It's just being dealt a different hand, really, isn't it? It's kind of everyone's dealt a different hand completely, and it doesn't make what the hand that someone else has dealt as any less important than yours. It's just how you process that and how you deal with the hand that's been given to you. And like, you're a good example of not falling into the trap of believing everything that's been told, and sort of falling victim to a narrative that's been painted of you. And you've been self-aware enough to be able to go, actually, I don't want this for myself. I'm going to try something and sort of prove other people wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And not everyone is like that. So it's obviously testament to your persona and your ability to be able to be self-aware. But it also means that, other people can just give it a go and see what happens, really. It's not, as you say, what's the worst that can happen? For you, it's some things do have quite dire consequences, but for other people, if you don't have something that's like life-threatening, then you've got even more of a reason to just try stuff, because you don't have that sort of, that sort of negative side of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that if you slowed down or stopped, are you worried about what might happen if you ever did that? Has it ever crossed your mind, or is it just kind of, you don't tend to really think about that sort of things?
No, it's definitely something I have thought about before. The what if I sat down? I mean, it wouldn't be in my nature not to do any form of movement. I love it. It gives me so much. And actually last year was the first year in many years I didn't chase a big goal. I just thought, you know what, I've done the Ultra Ironman. I'm just going to breeze this year, train, do what I want to do. And what was interesting was the fact that my mindset suffered for that. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But I know for me, like, I love being able to achieve things. And I'd literally just not set out to do anything. So I was like, I'm just going to give myself a year off. I'm going to do what I fancy. But having that lack of structure and that lack of goal really did impact me. And it doesn't have to mean that every single year I go and chase these huge things that are crazy. But I think for me, it is important to have some form of goal, whether it be fitness related, career related, and all these things. Because although obviously it did kind of impact my health a bit in terms of like, because I wasn't training in a structured way, of course my health suffered a little bit, but in a very different scenario now, I'm on a medication that does keep my health stable. I don't have to chase the big goals to say, like, I chase them because I want to and because I love being in that scenario of having the devil on your shoulder being like, you could stop if you wanted, and having the opportunity to defy that and prove to yourself that you can do hard things and you can do things that most people wouldn't want to do. And so for me now, I do it for a completely different reason. That's the reason I started doing it, which is amazing.
Yeah. The idea of reframing stuff is something I've worked on quite recently as well, especially with the running, because I've never really been a runner. I've always been active, always been sporty, but I've never done any sort of endurance running. But I heard it on another podcast, and I've tried implementing it. I had a friend down at the weekend, actually, he kept saying it to me because I kept saying, I have to do something, and he's like, no, you get to do something. And I was like,
that is true.
That's the reframing I've been trying to do, is actually, I don't have to run. I don't have to go out in the cold. I don't have to go out in the wet, and it's not woe is me. It's cold is fine. I'm not going to, you're not going to melt in the rain, whatever. But actually just that simple switch of saying, it's not I have to, it's I get to do it. I have all my mental faculties. I have all my limbs. I'm in good health. I can run, I can walk, I can jog, I can, can't do a backflip, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But just being able to do that. Whereas there's so many people that's just one thing. It's like, there's an old saying, it's like, what, a healthy person wants 1,000 things, a sick person only wants one.
Yeah.
And it's quite true, really. It's like, okay, you notice it when you get, you get a sore throat, or you get under the weather, or you get a cold. The only thing you can think about is, God, I wish I just didn't have a blocked nose, or I didn't have a sore throat or something. Whereas when you're going around day to day, you just don't really appreciate that stuff at all. So no. I'm trying to work on reframing that.
That is so good. And actually, we must have been aligned, because at the weekend I was also thinking in that way, because obviously broke my wrist, whatever, that's by the by. But I also have a chest infection, which I've not had for a long time. Just, everything always comes at once, like, just see how bad you want to do stuff. And I was running, and I was like, I don't remember the last time I had to run breathless, as in like gasping for air because I actually cannot breathe. A bit like the old me, really. And it really humbled me, because I was like, do you know what? The old me still would have had the attitude, if I get to further, I can still run even though it's really hard to breathe. And I was like, do you know what? I can't let that person down, myself. And two, like, I still get to go and do this stuff. And I bet you anything, if I couldn't do it, I'd want to do it. And therefore it's that vicious circle. So I was also telling myself while I was suffering like the weekend, it might be a bit harder than I think it should be, and I might not be able to breathe, but I still get to go and do this. And how lucky and privileged is that I can still move my body in the way I want to move it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's. I want to get a guest on. I don't know if you heard of him. He's called Mark Ormrod, and he's a triple amputee. But I follow his social media, and I think he was the second. He was the first triple amputee since the Second World War or something back in 2007. He was pronounced dead twice. He was an IED out in Afghanistan, I believe, and he's a motivational speaker now. And he was in the news recently because someone stole his gym kit and it had all his prosthetics in. So he was like, I don't know, why would you steal my leg, sort of thing. But he's amazing. Like, you follow his account, and he is, he's just got an arm, but he does jiu-jitsu, he swims, he did the Invictus Games, and it's like it's just different levels to this game where you think you're hard done by with a lot of stuff, but then you meet people like yourself, and then you get Mark as well, and it's like there's just so many different levels where you're like, okay, well, I have all my faculties, I haven't got anything, any ailments or anything like that, but yet I still sometimes can't bring myself to go and do a run or whatever. And then you got you, for example, where you're like, well, okay, I've only got like 50% of my lung capacity, but I still get to go out and run. And then you get Mark, who's got, well, I've only got one arm, but at least I still get to roll around on the mats and do jiu-jitsu. And it's, bloody hell, it's just, when you just realise that actually your problems are very, very small in comparison to everyone else's, and it doesn't make them any less valid. And this kind of a point which I think social media does get carried away in that, and you alluded to it earlier, where it's like, you don't have to do an almighty goal that breaks records for it to be, to be considered worth anything. It doesn't mean that your self-worth or your sense of worth should be any less for doing a couch to 5K, for example. But it just goes to show that there are different levels to this game where, you can come up with every excuse under the sun, but there's someone out there who's probably had a very different deck of cards dealt to them. They've got it in relative terms, they got it a lot worse than you, but they're still out there doing it and doing what they want to do. So yeah, it's good to bear that in mind and realize there are people out there that are out there doing that sort of thing.
Oh, definitely, because I think it's too easy not to, isn't it? And you get so stuck in your own mind.
So in terms of all your achievements to date, is there any standout ones for you? What's your proudest achievement to date, do you think?
I think obviously Kilimanjaro is significant, as I've said. Why? One of the other ones that, I don't know if actually I'm talking on this, so you're going to be first. I went to Somerton Mont Blanc a few years ago, and it was again like I had 2 weeks notice, off you go. And I think when we were on the drive up there, I actually sat there, and for the first time ever, I was actually quite scared. And I wasn't sure whether I'd be able to cope with it, because I wasn't particularly well at the time, altitude and all this stuff. And I remember just thinking like, you don't have to go and do this stuff. But I did go and do it, and it was phenomenal. If anyone likes to climb mountains, it's one that I definitely do before global warming gets hold of everything, because it was, it was beautiful. We saw skiers being dropped off in the helicopters to go and ski down, but it was so peaceful as well. Although I think it was definitely by far one of the hardest climbs I've ever done, just because it was very technical. Like, we had to rock climb over like rocks and ice and stuff and things like that. And I think for me that was very much a test of like, you can bail, but I didn't bail. And it's something that to this day, like, I am still really proud that I went out and did that thing that even I wasn't sure I could achieve.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's nice to know you're human as well. Like, I think people
I'm definitely human.
Overlook that, and that's the problem with social media a lot of the time, is that you see the nice, the best bits. And to be honest, you're one of the few people I think who is a bit more authentic with it when you say, actually, I'm not having a very good day today, and this is what's happened. But a lot of people aren't, and it's just all sunshine and rainbows, and you think, bloody hell, they just never get any sort of sense of doubt or anything. But you have no idea, obviously, what goes on behind the scenes. You only get a little snapshot. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that one.
And also, I think on that note, like, I think, I'm hoping to be able to share a lot more vulnerability going into this challenge, because, it's going to be really difficult, and I'm definitely going to cry a lot. I think.
I think there's it's I always find it difficult because I see a lot of things now where it can go the other way as well, where you see people being vulnerable and there's just something that isn't quite right with their vulnerabilities, if that makes sense. So as with anything now, you see people being, genuine on the face value. I see a lot of these videos now on YouTube where people are giving, gifts of kindness to people, and they're out giving money to people. And there's one particular guy, he asks people to, if they want like a toy handbag or something, and he goes up to random people and it's got like $1,000 in it or something, and he's like, oh yeah, like change your life sort of thing. But there's something that just doesn't quite sit right with me in that, because actually they're not being, it's not authentic. They're doing it for views, and ultimately they're doing it to make money. And I think there's some people that can do that with the vulnerability aspect as well, where it gets thrown around a lot. The word trauma gets thrown around a lot these days as well, and you can kind of end up with people that are like, oh yeah, I'm being like my most vulnerable self, I'm being really whatever, but you just know it's to kind of get the views. I think there is a fine line between the authenticity and vulnerability element, but
Definitely.
I'm not saying you're not authentic. Sorry, I'll just make that explicitly clear. I'm not talking about you in this instance,
No, I realise that. But I think you're right, and I think obviously people do it for views, versus being real, completely real about it.
I mean, I look forward to seeing it, and I've been following along with your runs. I've got you on Strava now as well, so
I have to find you on Strava, see how you're getting on.
Yeah, it's
I'm going to be doing lots of running during that challenge, so if you fancy a run, you know where I'm going to be.
Yeah, so I mean, if we can, obviously, this leads us on to the next question, really, about the latest challenge. We haven't really talked about it yet, so can you tell us a little bit more about the latest challenge, and perhaps if anyone wants to get involved and support you with that, how we might be able to do so?
Oh, absolutely. So basically, I'm challenging myself to run 36 marathons in 36 days. Starting with the London Marathon, so 21st of April, finishing on the Edinburgh Marathon. I will be sharing all my routes that have already been planned out on Strava. So if anyone does want to come and run and entertain me, I'd be forever grateful. It's going to be by far the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm going to be fundraising as well for the CF Trust, obviously close to my heart, so I'm there for obvious reasons. But the reason behind the marathon challenge is because I actually wanted to do this when I turned 30, and for reference, I'm 32, not 36. But it was locked down, and it just wasn't something that could happen during that time. And it's never really kind of left my mind. And I got into the London Marathon, I was doing the Edinburgh Marathon, and I just literally thought, what are the days there are? And once that thought hit my head, and I realised that I could do something that potentially I've always wanted to do, I was like, well, what have I got to lose? Although I definitely also counted the days wrong, and originally it was a 35-day challenge.
35, yeah.
And then my coach was like, just let you know, it's 36. So here we are.
What's okay.
Victory lap. Just next one, why not?
Parade lap.
And for me, it's something that I've wanted to do. It's something that most people would probably think was insane, which I do as well, as we're heading into a month away from simulation week. And that's terrifying for me. I literally thought about it the other day, and I was like, oh my goodness. But, you have to push yourself into these things if you want to achieve big things. And it's going to be a phenomenal experience. But as I've said, I want as many people to join me as they want to. You don't have to run a marathon. You can run a 5K. You can run a K. You can run however long you want. And I will be sharing all the routes as they're happening. But there also will be a live tracking link available, so you can see how we're getting on as well, which will be quite fun. And the latest thing, which is one of the other drivers, is the Guinness World Records have found that it can potentially be a world record, or
awesome,
to be the first person, or the actual title is, the most consecutive marathons run by someone with cystic fibrosis being female.
Awesome. Do you know what the standing is? Is there anything, has it been done before? Like, is there a record with a number of?
No, so this is creating a record.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So that, again, it's been a year in the making. I've been trying to push that for the last year. So to finally get that just in time felt amazing. So it's all systems go, with obviously evidencing and things like that. And so obviously a massive driving force. And I now have a new fear that my watch is going to fail me. So
Saw
I'm
your
now going to be
post.
running with 2 watches.
I saw your post the other day. Yeah. Never
Yeah.
ideal. It's like the runner's dread, isn't it? Same as cycling, I think, when you get to the end of your eye.
Yeah.
I've done a bloody great ride today, and then, battery died, or halfway through, or you're like,
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to be using 2 watches because for some unknown reason, which has never happened before, my Garmin keeps telling me fails as I go to save a run.
No, it's just
So,
you're just doing too much. It's saying, do you know what?
Yeah, it's tired.
Can't keep up with you. So, do you have any favourite snacks or anything that might be incentive to just? You see me, I'll try and run behind you with a plate of cookies or something.
Excellent news. Excellent. Anything, honestly, anything you can find in the bakery, or I do love saltine the crisps as well.
Ooh.
And I'm going to need the salt.
Yeah.
So, and to be honest, I don't think I'm going to be fussy at that point. I think I'm just going to be like, have someone feed me.
Get it done, yeah. Awesome.
So yeah, it's going to be exciting.
No, it sounds incredible. I think I don't have any doubt that you'll be able to do it. You've clearly demonstrated you've got a track record of being able to do very hard things, very difficult things. So yeah, every faith in your ability to do that. And yeah, I'll try and I'll have a look at the routes, see if I can get down. Maybe we can get if anyone's listening, we may be able to get a bit of a group together and do a bit of a, I'll get the foam finger out and.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's going to be some in London as well.
Yeah.
So there's also opportunity because I think London's quite a good hub for most people. So
awesome. So if people want to follow along with your training and sort of keep up to date with your social media, where would they go?
All the handles are just my name, so Sophie Grace Holmes.
Sophie Grace Holmes. Awesome.
Simple.
Nice one. Well, thank you very much. Awesome.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. It's as I say, you've been someone I've been keen to get on for a while now, and I just really love your approach and your outlook to life. You're very genuine with how it is, and just I think I've taken a lot away from this episode and some of your other stories that you've done in the past and other podcasts. So I don't want to inflate your ego too much, so otherwise your head might not go through the door after the podcast. But yeah, awesome. Really.
No, thanks so much.
So thanks so much for coming on.
No, thank you.